For years I confided in my best friend, sharing my fears and secrets, until one day I realized she had been telling everything to my brother behind my back, and the betrayal stung even more because my family chose to believe her lies over me. I thought Sarah was my person. For 8 years, she was the sister I never had, the one who held my hair back during college parties, who helped me pick out my wedding dress, who knew every insecurity I'd ever had. When I called her sobbing at 2 a.m. because Jake and I had another, she was there. When I confessed my worst fears about not being good enough, pretty enough, successful enough, she listened without judgment. Or so I thought. The signs were there. I see them now clear, like looking at a photo where someone's been out but can still see their shadow. The way my brother Marcus would bring things during family dinners that I'd only told Sarah. How he'd make little comments about my marriage that felt too specific, too knowing. The weird looks between them at my wedding reception. But I was so desperate for validation, so hungry for someone to understand me, that I ignored every red flag waving in my face. It started small. I'd tell Sarah about Jake's annoying habits, how he left dishes in the sink or forgot to put the toilet seat down. Normal relationship complaints, right? Everyone vents to their friends. But then it escalated. I told her about our intimacy problems, how Jake worked late too often, how I felt lonely in my own marriage. I told her things I should have told a therapist, not a friend who apparently had a direct line to my family. The betrayal began 3 months into my marriage. Jake had been distant, working on some big project, and I felt invisible in my own home. I started confiding more in Sarah, sharing fears that maybe I'd married the wrong person, that maybe I wasn't out for marriage at all. She'd nod sympathetically and say all the right things about how relationships take work, how communication is key. What I didn't know was that every vulnerable moment, every confession, every tear I shed in her living room was being reported back to Marcus like some twisted intelligence operation. The first appeared at my mom's birthday dinner 6 months later. Marcus made a comment about how some people think marriage is just about feeling good all the time instead of commitment. The words hit different, too specific, like he knew something. When I confronted him later, he brushed it off, said he was just speaking generally. But Sarah's reaction when I told her about the conversation was off. She got defensive, started asking why I thought Marcus might know anything about my marriage. That should have been my wake call. Instead, I apologized to her for being paranoid. The gaslighting was masterful, really. She'd pump me for information about my relationship, then act shocked when family members seemed to know details. Maybe Jake talks to Marcus more than think, she'd suggest. Men confide in each other differently than women do. I started doubting everything. Was I being paranoid? Was Jake sharing our private moments with my brother? The confusion made me lean on Sarah even more, tell her even deeper secrets. It was a perfect trap and I walked right into it. The worst part, I began pulling away from Jake because I thought he was the one betraying me. Our marriage started crumbling under the weight of my suspicion and Sarah's manipulation, and she was right there with tissues and encouraging me to share more, feel more, confess more. I told her about the time Jake forgot our anniversary. I told her about the we had about kids, how he wanted them sooner than I did. I told her about my fears that I was turning into my mother, settling for a man who didn't really see me. Every insecurity, every doubt, every moment of weakness went straight from my mouth to her ears to my brother's judgment. The family dynamics shifted subtly. Mom started making comments about young marriages and rushing into things. Dad would ask pointed questions about how Jake was treating me. My sister-in-law began acting strangely around me, like she knew something I didn't. I felt crazy, like there was a conversation happening around me that I wasn't part of, a story being told about me that I didn't recognize. Every family gathering became a minefield of loaded comments and knowing looks. Sarah played her role perfectly. She'd defend Jake when others criticized him, making herself look like the loyal friend while secretly feeding them ammunition. She'd console me when I felt confused about my family's behavior, all while being the source of their information. The manipulation was so complete that when I finally started to suspect her, I felt guilty about it. She was my best friend. She'd never me. I was just being paranoid because my marriage was falling apart and I needed someone to blame. But seeds of doubt, once planted, are hard to ignore. I started paying attention to the timing of things. How my brother would bring problems right after I'd talked to Sarah. How she always seemed to know more about family gossip than she should. How she'd steer conversations toward my relationship troubles, then act like she was just being a good friend by listening. The worst betrayal was yet to come, though, because what I didn't know was that Sarah hadn't just been sharing my secrets. She'd been adding her own interpretation, her own spin, painting me as unstable and unreliable while positioning herself as the concerned friend trying to help. My family wasn't just hearing my confessions, they were hearing Sarah's version of them, complete with her commentary about my mental state, my marriage and my character. I was about to lose everything, and the person I trusted most was holding the truth came out on a Tuesday. Such a mundane day for my entire world to collapse. I'd gone to lunch with my cousin Emma, who'd always been the family gossip but in a harmless way. She was telling me about some drama with her neighbor when she casually mentioned how worried everyone was about me. Worried about what? I asked, genuinely confused. Emma looked uncomfortable, like she'd said something wrong. No, with everything Sarah's been telling Marcus. About struggles. The mind went cold. What struggles? The depression, the marriage problems. She trailed off, seeing my expression. Oh no. Don't do. The next hour was the most of my Emma, horrified that she'd spilled something I apparently wasn't supposed to know, told me everything. How Marcus had been updating the family on my mental health crisis for months. How they'd all been walking on eggshells around me because Sarah had told him I was having episodes. How they'd discussed staging an intervention. According to Sarah's reports, I was severely depressed, possibly having a breakdown, and my marriage was failing because I was emotionally unstable. She'd shared my private confessions but twisted them, made my normal relationship struggles sound like symptoms of mental illness. The room spun. Every family interaction from the past year suddenly made horrible sense. The gentle way my mother had been talking to me, like I might break. The way my father kept asking if I was okay, with this concerned look in his eyes. The way Marcus had been treating Jake with extra friendliness, like he felt sorry for him. They all thought I was losing my mind, and they thought they knew cause my best friend had told them so. I drove straight to Sarah's apartment, my hand shaking on the steering wheel. She answered the door with that same warm smile that had fooled me for months. "Hey. What's wrong? Lou, need to talk," I said, pushing past her into the living room where we'd had hundreds of conversations, where I'd trusted her with my soul. I confronted her with everything Emma had told me. Watched her face go through a rapid cycle of expressions: surprise, denial, guilt, and finally defiance. "I was worried about," she said, crossing her arms. "We're saying some really concerning things. I thought family should know." "Concerning things? Like what?" "That my husband works late. That we had about kids." "It was more than that, and know it. We're talking about feeling trapped, about questioning marriage constantly." Sounded depressed, was trying to help, but the gaslighting was immediate and vicious. Suddenly I was the crazy one for being upset that she'd betrayed my confidence. I was overreacting. I was proving her point about my instability, but I wasn't the same naive woman who'd been spilling her secrets for months. The betrayal had crystallized something hard and cold inside me. Took my private thoughts and turned them into ammunition against me. Made my family think I'm having a mental breakdown. Maybe are. She back, and there it was. The truth: she didn't just think she was helping. She genuinely believed I was unstable, and she'd appointed herself as my handler. That followed was nuclear. Years of friendship incinerated in minutes. She accused me of being dramatic, of always playing the victim, of never taking responsibility for my problems. I accused her of being manipulative, of destroying my family relationships, of betraying every confidence I'd ever shared. Family needed to know what was really going on, she screamed. We're falling apart and dragging Jake down with. Someone had to be the. That's when I realized the full scope of her betrayal. She hadn't just shared my secrets. She'd been actively working to undermine my marriage, convincing my family that Jake was a saint pudding with his mentally ill wife. I left her apartment and drove to my brother's house. Marcus answered the door with that pitying expression I now recognized, the one that said he thought his little sister was losing her grip on reality. "We need to talk," I said for the second time that day. The conversation with Marcus was worse than the one with Sarah because it revealed how completely she'd poisoned the well. He genuinely believed I was having a breakdown. He had spreadsheets of concerning things Sarah had reported. Spreadsheets, my emotional confessions organized and categorized like symptoms. "She's been keeping track of mental state for months," he said, showing me his phone. The mood swings, the irrational thoughts about Jake, the paranoia about family members knowing business. Even confronted with the circular logic, Sarah reporting my paranoia about family members knowing my business while being the one telling them my business, Marcus couldn't see the manipulation. Sarah had gotten there first, established the narrative and positioned herself as the reliable source. "She cares about," he insisted. "We all do. This is what interventions look like sometimes." I realized then that I wasn't just fighting Sarah's betrayal. I was fighting months of careful narrative construction. She'd built a story about me that felt true to everyone who heard it because it was based on real confessions, real moments of vulnerability, just twisted and contextualized to support her version of events. My parents, my siblings, my extended family, they all had the same concern. Pitying expression when I tried to explain what had really happened. They saw my anger as proof of Sarah's claims about my instability, my as evidence of my paranoia, my betrayal as confirmation of my victim complex. The intervention happened anyway. 3 days later, my entire family gathered in my parents' living room to express their concerns about my mental health and my marriage. Sarah wasn't there, but her presence filled the room through every worried comment, every gentle suggestion that I seek help. Jake was there too, looking confused, and he still didn't understand what had happened, just that his wife's family thought she was having a breakdown, and that their marriage was in crisis because of her mental state. I sat in that room, surrounded by people who loved me, and realized that Sarah had successfully isolated me from all of them. My truth sounded crazy compared to her carefully constructed narrative. My reality looked like delusion next to her documented concerns. The intervention wasn't malicious. It was loving, worried, genuine care from people who thought they were saving me from, which made it infinitely worse than if they'd just been cruel. That night, Jake and I had the worst of our marriage. He'd been blindsided by my family's concerns, didn't understand why I hadn't talked to him about my depression, couldn't comprehend how his wife had been suffering so much without him knowing. "Are having a breakdown?" he asked quietly. "Because everyone seems to think are, and I feel like I don't even know what's real anymore." I looked at my husband, the man I'd promised to share everything with, and realized that Sarah's had reached him too. He was questioning my sanity, my stability, my truth. That's when I understood that winning this war wasn't about proving Sarah wrong. The damage was too deep, too widespread, too carefully constructed. I was going to lose everything, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. 6 months later, I'm writing this from a studio apartment across town, divorce papers signed, family relationships in ruins, and my former best friend living her best on social media. The marriage couldn't survive it. How could it? Jake tried. I'll give him credit for that, but Sarah had planted seeds of doubt about my mental stability that bloomed every time we had a normal disagreement. Every time I got frustrated or sad or angry about anything, I could see him wondering if this was what my family had been worried about. He started suggesting therapy. Gently, lovingly, but the implication was clear: he thought something was wrong with me too. The woman he'd married had apparently been hiding a mental health crisis so severe that her family had to intervene. "I just want to understand what been going through," he'd say, and I'd want to scream that I hadn't been going through anything except normal marriage adjustments that I'd stupidly shared with the wrong person. But how to explain that breakdown isn't a breakdown? It's a betrayal. How to convince someone they're not crazy when everyone they trust says are? The divorce was civil but cold. Jake got the house, I got the debt, and everyone felt sorry for him for having to deal with his unstable ex-wife. Even our mutual friends sided with him, because Sarah's narrative had spread through our social circle like a virus. My family still thinks they were saving me. They're proud of themselves for the intervention, convinced that my anger about it just proves how much I needed their help. Every family gathering I skip becomes more evidence of my poor mental health. Every attempt I make to explain what really happened sounds more like paranoid delusion. Sarah has been accepted into the family with open arms. She's the hero of this story in their minds, the loyal friend who tried to save me from. She shows to family events now, gets invited to holidays, has inside jokes with my mother. She's taken my place. The cruelest part is that I did start having mental health problems after everything fell apart. The isolation, the divorce, the loss of my entire support system, it actually did trigger depression and anxiety. So now when I tell people that I'm not crazy, that this all started because my friend betrayed me, I have a documented history of mental health treatment that makes my story sound even less credible. It's the perfect crime, really. Destroy someone so thoroughly that the destruction itself becomes evidence that they deserved it. I've tried to rebuild, made new friends, started dating, found a therapist who actually listens to my story without assuming I'm delusional. But the trust issues run deep. How to confide in people when deepest confidences were weaponized against? How to believe anyone when the person closest to spent months systematically destroying while pretending to care? The dating is especially brutal. How to explain to potential partners that marriage ended because best friend convinced family were mentally ill? It sounds insane. It sounds like something an unstable person would make to avoid taking responsibility for their failed marriage. So I don't date much. Don't make close friends. Don't confide in people. I've learned to keep my struggles too, which probably makes me seem cold and distant, which probably makes people think there really was something wrong with me all along. Sometimes I wonder if Sarah was right. Maybe I was unstable. Maybe I was too needy, too dramatic, too much work as a friend and wife. Maybe she did everyone a favor by exposing my flaws before I could hide them better. But then I remember that she never tried to help me directly. Never suggested therapy to my face. Never expressed concern about my well-being. She went straight to my family with her worries, bypassed me entirely in her rush to save everyone from me. That's not what friends do. That's what enemies do. I see her sometimes around town. She's always friendly, asks how I'm doing with that same concerned tone she used when she was mining my secrets. She talks about missing our friendship, about hoping I'm getting the help I need. The performance is flawless. She genuinely believes she's the victim here, that I turned on her for caring too much. In her mind, she's the misunderstood hero of a tragedy about mental illness and family loyalty. Last month I saw her at my nephew's birthday party. She'd been invited, I hadn't been. She was laughing with my mother, helping serve cake to my brother's kids, fitting seamlessly into the family space I used to occupy. My replacement was everything I wasn't: stable, reliable, trustworthy. She didn't air her problems to inappropriate people or make her loved ones worry about her mental state. She was the kind of person families want around their children. Standing outside that party I wasn't welcome at, watching my former friend living my old, I finally understood the real cost of trusting the wrong person. It's not just that she took my secrets and used them against me, it's that she took my place. My family, my social circle, my entire identity as someone worth trusting and including. She didn't just betray me, she erased me. Now I know why they say trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets. It takes years to build the kind of friendship I had with Sarah, and seconds to destroy everything it was supposed to protect. I'm not the same person who used to call her crying at 2 a.m. That woman was naive enough to believe that friendship meant safety, that love meant loyalty, that the people closest to would never use vulnerabilities as weapons. This woman knows better. This woman keeps her secrets, guards her heart, and never forgets that the person holding hand might also be holding a. The scariest part isn't that Sarah betrayed me. The scariest part is that she did it while genuinely believing she was helping, which means she could do it to anyone, anytime, with a clear conscience. Trust someone with deepest fears, and might wake one day to find they've shared them with the world as proof of why can't be trusted.